you, Doug Smith.
Let me just, hold on a second, I got the stopwatch here, let me get that started. I go ahead and put my plug in here. This is my book. It will, hopefully I will have copies from the printer in the first week of December with the holidays and everything. So I'm looking at, it's 668 pages. It is full of photographs. I'm a photograph nut. I wanted a coffee table kind of book. It has 868 photographs. It's right at 48% color and the other black and white. It's 6 pounds. It's about George Saxon, but it's more than just about George Saxon. And the title is called For the Public, George Washington Saxon, For the Public Good. And it's the true story of an extraordinary life and history of Tallahassee. I had one person ask me one time, said, that had gone through some of the drafts, and that was about 12 chapters before I had finished, or 40 chapters in it. And he said, Doug, is this about George Saxon or is this about Tallahassee, history of Tallahassee? I said, well, you can't talk about one without talking about the other. Which brings me to the Tallahassee Street Railway Company. If you will go to the next slide, I think I can remember. George Saxon's involved in this, and I'll get to that in a minute. And I did this presentation 2 years ago for the Tallahassee Historical Society at one of our monthly meetings. And so I'm going to kind of go through this and kind of quick. I'm not going to read everything out and take an hour and a half like I did in the last one. But the first mention of a streetcar, and I've highlighted this in red, was in 1887. There was talk about doing a streetcar from Villa Mitchell, which is bottom of the hill at FAMU, near the depot, and it would go through town. And that was the first mention of it. And this was in June of 1887. Okay. Tallahassee was not the only city in Florida with street railway. A lot of people don't realize that. These are some of the cities: Tampa, Orlando, Palatka. I'll let you read those for Fernandina. We can go ahead and go to the next chapter. Our next slide. Jacksonville, 1883, 1887. These are photographs. You can go ahead. Orlando, Fort Meade, Palatka. Tampa had steam-powered streetcar. Pensacola, 1884. So, in March of 1889, the Weekly Floridian announced that Tallahassee was having a waterworks and a streetcar. And this is the ad, or the banner line in the paper.
Boom ahead.
I'm sorry?
I like that booming ahead. Tallahassee's a boom ahead.
Oh, it's a boom, yeah.
It's a
yeah.
boom, yeah.
Now, and I'll talk about this in a second, but this was a really quotable line, and you can read it, but I'll read it out loud. Wouldn't it be exciting to have a locomotive stretching along Monroe Street in the fall months, when it is crowded with wagons and cars and laden with cotton and other marketable products, and to see mules and horses prancing and dancing and running away, endangering life and limb? Now you go, no, wait a minute, that's not the streetcar. Next. And I'll come back to that in a minute. George Saxon. This was George Saxon's idea. This is George and his daughter Bessie in 1886 photograph. In the local newspaper, Newton M. Bowen wrote this article, and he was giving credit to the streetcar and the waterworks. They were kind of hand in hand. That's in another chapter in the book. I won't talk about the waterworks today. Tallahassee Railway Company was incorporated October 29th of 1889. And here is a notice of incorporation. It ran in a newspaper. Charles H. Bennett, Richard L. Bennett, and George W. Saxon. These are These are a couple of things that are different about my last presentation. Since, just in the last couple of months, fortunately before I finished the book, I obtained a photograph of Richard Langworthy Bennett, and his uncle, Charles Henry Bennett. These were the two men. George brought these two men from Philadelphia to Tallahassee to make investments in Tallahassee infrastructure, railroads, waterworks. And quick story, I got a phone call about 2 months ago from Betty Asler at St. John's Church, St. John's Episcopal Church. That's a joke. I had to catch myself there. And she called me, she said, have you ever heard of R.L. Bennett? And I went, Richard St. John Langworthy Bennett? She goes, how do you know that? And I said, well, he's 4 chapters in my book. His great-granddaughter came to Tallahassee from New Mexico looking for his grave. And he's buried in the Old City Cemetery. She thought that he was in Episcopal Cemetery, the fence of St. John's Cemetery. It was locked. They went to St. John's. The lady got on the phone and says, no, but Betty Asler does. She called Betty Asler because, no, he's not in there. Her husband got on the phone, got on Find the Grave, and said, no, he's in Old City Cemetery. I said, well, where is she? She said, well, that was a couple of weeks ago. She's gone to New Mexico. I said, give me her phone number. So I called her, and she was in the process at the same time of writing a book about her ancestry. So I am now acknowledged in her book because I provided her information that she did not know about our event. Get that in next slide. It just, I call it one of my goosebump moments. Charles, yeah, let me backtrack one step. I talked to the guys talking about the railroad stretching through the middle of town. Well, the reason for that was that George's proposal, they were going to build a railroad from Tallahassee to Thomasville. And then at the other end, on the south end, they were going to build a railroad from the depot to Apalachicola. So what they were going to do to save having to go and do all the grading, they were going to come right down the middle of Monroe Street, right in front of the Capitol. And that would save them on, so that was what they planned on doing. They did the railroad, the street railway, and then they went into the process of trying to get a railroad to Thomasville and one to Apalachicola, and they would hook up at both ends. So if you've been through, I think, was it Cairo, I believe, or there's a couple of places in Georgia where the railroad tracks go right through the middle of town. That's what Tallahassee would have. But of course, it never happened. So this is what they were going to do. It's called the Tallahassee Northern. And in June of 1890, like I said, it was running from Tallahassee to the Georgia line. Then they had to incorporate it from there into Thomasville. So there was another incorporation in the Georgia part. Okay. I'm not going to go into a lot of this, but this is part of my talk. I call it historical distortion. I have read so many stories about the street railway, how it was, supposedly eyewitness accounts. Go ahead. And so I went through and really did a lot of digging. These are just some of the instances. These are newspaper articles. The most, and I went through the earliest stage. One of the ones that you'll see in the next slide was Sally Blake did an article in the 1935 Tallahassee Historical Society. She actually did a presentation in 1933. That's the one that most people are aware of, and because it was written and it was published, and it was written anyway, and so that's what everybody has gone. Well, nah, she's kind of right, but not completely right, and it wasn't the full story. Then there were other eyewitness accounts, and these were the people that I've identified that actually had an account of the railroad. And you can see, now this guy here, Philip Manville Ball, is the one that he was an eyewitness. He was on the first railroad, on the first line, the first voyage, or whatever you call it. But he was on it. He was 9 years old. That would be old enough to remember it. And he was eyewitness. And then there was another in 32, who's 21, Sally Blake. She wrote about it in 1934, and she was at 36. Now, when I looked at this, I went, now wait a minute. How old were they when they witnessed it? Okay, were you 4 years old? Yeah, I wouldn't count on it, you know. And then, how old were you when your recollection of it was? So you have a possibility on both ends of that spectrum to not know the full facts or be clouded in the case of Sally Blake. Then Archer, Bessie Archer McGinnis in 61, and Ben McGinnis, and then Fenton Davis Avant in 1883. You can see she was age 1, sometime between 1 and 6, and her recollection was from 1 to 6. So that and you'll see about that in a minute if you'll go ahead. Sally Blake, this is probably what most people had used to seeing about the streetcar, was a sketch. I'm not sure who did the sketch. I would assume that maybe Sally Blake did, but I don't know for sure. And this is one of the quotes that I really like that she wrote. It's hard for one who never saw the quaint old car, the tiny red mules, and the dear old drivers to visualize just what it was like. Sally Blake, 1934. She witnessed it at age 26 to 31, and her recollection was at age 7. She talked about the mules. So I went and to the mules, and she's the one that named the 2 mules, Napoleon and Bucephalus. And she said there were 2 red mules. So black and white, can't tell. But I believe there's a very good possibility that these are the 2 black mules, are the 2, Napoleon and Bucephalus. These are separate photographs and with the 3 mules. So you'll notice the white around the muzzle, same mule right here. Okay, and this other mule is a different color. The lady that sent me the photographs of the Bennett, I now have a name for the 3rd one, and that mule was called Fanny. And this is brand new, brand new. I mean, none of this has ever been seen. Next one.
Doug, how big was Tallahassee when this thing?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How big was Tallahassee when this was built?
1890, what? Was it, Doug, help me out, 1600, 2200, 2300, somewhere in there?
Yeah, at the time of the centennial, it was only a couple thousand, like 2,500.
Yeah.
So it's probably under 2,000.
Yeah, it's somewhere around, I think less than 2,000.
And how
Fenton,
many of those were slaves?
yeah, Fenton Davis Avant, she's the one of the witnesses, and I'm not going to go through all of what her son actually wrote the book, David Avant. And, but she said, at some point, the tracks turned west a block to Adams Street and continued south on Adams Street to St. Augustine Street. You'll see here in a minute, that is not true. Next slide. Ben McGinnis's recollection, and I won't go through this, but one thing that I picked up on was he said, I came home from Jacksonville on the train. Entering Tallahassee, it passed the Middle Florida Ice Company. Well, the Middle Florida Ice Company is only in one place, so you know where he's talking about. But I was trying to figure out, okay, when? Well, Middle Florida Ice Company was built in 1894. So I know that when Ben McGinnis came to town, it had to be after 1894. Now, the dates, and you'll see Middle Florida Ice Company was built by Robert Gamble in January 1800, which supports age 11 or 12. So his witness is at age 11 or 12. So I'm trying to determine if you know, what those dates told me, and this was right at the end of the streetcar, which was 1890 to 1895, and I'll go into that in a minute. Next slide. The other eyewitness was William Powell, and he talked about it, and he supported the other arguments because I looked at everybody's statement. Was it consistent throughout? Trying to determine if it was accurate or not. And he said that the car held about 8 passengers, and then in 1932 they dug up a piece of it on Monroe Street from the courthouse. Next slide. This is Philip Manville Ball. His father was Willis Manville Ball, who later became the editor of the Florida Times in Jacksonville. Next one. When it started, they had a streetcar excursion, and they took a ride and went down to the depot and looked at the stables. They went to the northern end of the line, and they rode, up and down the line a couple times. Then they stopped at the St. James Hotel and had cigars and champagne. And the men, 8 of the men that I have photographs of that were in it, Collins, John W. Collins, he was the editor of the Weekly True Democrat. You had Saxon, you had Papyrus DeMille, he was a sheriff. You had Gorman, W.T. Caldwell, Governor Bloxham. This is in between his first term and his second term. I think he was the Speaker of the House, I believe, or maybe he's treasurer or something like that. But he was also on the excursion. And then Philip Manville Ball down in the bottom left-hand corner. Next one. Oh, and Judge Walker, George Keith Walker. His son is George Keith Walker III. He's still alive. He's in his 90s. And that's where the photograph came from, his great-grandson. The streetcar route and its construction. And just as the only photograph I could find of a streetcar being built, and this is the one in Jacksonville in 1901, just to give you an idea of kind of what they were doing. Next slide. They started building it. The railroad ties arrived in February of 1890. There were 6,500 ties were used. I calculated that. I did some research to find out how far apart they were, depending on the weight of the cars, and so about 6,500. 4 miles of steel rails, and the first passengers were on October the 7th of 1890. So there's your starting date, October 7th, 1890. Of course, they built a stable. Some people said they had a stable at the northern end. The stable was actually down by the depot. Speaking of the depot, this was the depot in 1880. Doug Alderson, I'm sure, is very familiar. The funny thing about this photograph is, if you look in the state archives, it's been changed now. But when I first came across this photograph, I looked at it and I went, wait a minute, this is not right. Something's not right about this photograph. It wasn't this one. The photograph had been inverted. And so if you put it over here on this side, if you're standing at All Saints Street, just or across the street from it now, you look at it, there it is, there's the rest of the building, but this is not there. This is Railroad Avenue there. But the problem with it, by having it on the other side, by having this photograph inverted, the railroad was on the wrong side of the building. So when I looked at it and I went to the state archive and said, flip this thing around. Said he did. So that would have been what was there in 1890. Okay. The route started at the depot, came up what is now Railroad Avenue. It was called St. Patrick's Street at that time. And then turned on to Gaines Street, came up the hill on Gaines Street, turned on to Duval, and then went 2 blocks to St. Augustine Street. Went 2 blocks up to Monroe Street. Here's the state capitol here. And then it went all the way out to Brevard Street, where Brevard Street is now. So this was the route of the streetcar. That area in blue was the original proposed route. Instead of being the turns here, it was done here. Now, if you go down to Pensacola Street and you're standing on Duval Street, and you'll notice it kind of goes up a hill. Coming this way, it wasn't a steep grade. So and then this line here is another little spur line, and I'll show you about that in a minute. Next line. Okay, and I forgot I had that one. So there's your proposed, and the red is the actual, and the blue line. So if you stand at Duval Street, and I'm thinking you stand in Duval and Pensacola Street, it's not as big, it doesn't appear to be as much of a hill, but it is. And especially then, it's been graded down. In May of 1890, Sanborn, everybody, if you're not aware, Chris, I talked to Chris about Sanborn maps the other day. Sanborn insurance maps. Is everybody aware about Sanborn insurance maps? Okay. The Sanborn insurance map was in 1890. If you go back a couple of slides, it says that they didn't start laying the tracks until, I think, well, they didn't open until October. I don't know why, something's not right here. How could they make this map, publish it in May of 1890? So, what this shows is two sets of tracks. And you'll notice over here, right here, where the track goes back into one. Same thing on the south side. So you've got, this is at Park to Call Street, and this is from Pensacola to Park. So at Pensacola Street, it went to two, so going through downtown, and then when it got on the other, almost to Call, halfway between Call and Park Avenue, then it merged back into one line. That's so that they could run two and pass it. Next line. Okay. Park, go back just one. Now, you'll notice right here, so this is, excuse me, this is between Park and Call Street. Go ahead, back to the Park and Call Street. Here's St. John's Episcopal Church. Okay, so Park Avenue's right here, and right here is Call Street. So that's standing right in front of the courthouse, what is now the bankruptcy court, looking down Monroe Street in sometime between 1890 and 1895. That's what it looks like. Now, what's obvious in this photograph is that here's the line right here. See, and you can see if you follow that. Where's the second line? Sanborn map said there was two. There never was a second line. They only put down one set of tracks. Next slide. I guess I had it twice. Okay. Here's another example of that. Here is Park Avenue, and you would be looking at you're at Park and Monroe Street. You would be looking at, you would be looking at the northwest corner of Park Avenue, and here's Park Avenue and Monroe Street. That's the Leon Hotel. It was burned down in, second time burned down was 1926. But, see that? And guess what? There's only one set of tracks. So then I knew that the Sanborn map they told them that they were going to do that, and they drew that on the Sanborn map, but it was never done. Next slide. Going a little further north, on the north side of Tennessee Street, where Virginia crosses. Okay, this is an Alvin Harper photograph. Here's the same photograph, but just taken from a different angle, taken at the same time. There's the track right there. And there's Alvin Harper's two dogs. And this is taken, that's looking north, and this is on the other side of the street. Okay, so you're looking north, and this is looking north that direction, but he's on the other side of the street. And there's the two dogs again, and there's the railroad track. And you can see it right up there as well. Next slide. Oh, let me go back one. This is another photograph that's in state archives. I went back to them and had them change it. The reason why is that somebody said that this photograph was taken after 1903. And the reason, because it had power lines. Well, guess what, folks? The track was torn up by 1895. That's not electric line. It's a telephone line. And by the way, George Saxon started the telephone company in 1895. So that dates this photograph as well, 1895. Okay, next one. This is at the corner of Duval and St. Augustine Street. St. Augustine Street has been cut there. You would go into the back of the Capitol. It's been blocked off now. But this is where it turned the corner. And it's kind of hard to see, but there's one there and one there. And that's where it turned the corner. This is Duval Street. You're going north this way, and you're making a turn here to go up St. Augustine Street. Next slide. People have seen this photograph 1,000 times. I've seen it 10,000 times, mainly because this was the location of George Saxon's store. These are actually his brother-in-laws that bought the store that he sold out his business in 1889. This particular W.A. Rawls was a druggist, and I was able to date this photograph. A lot of these photographs don't have dates, or the dates are wrong. I know that it's before 1895. There's the rail right there. There's a piece of rail running to the foreground of it. But also, this one, W.A. Rawls, underneath, I got high resolution photograph. Underneath it, it's his brother, T.G. Rawls. And T.G. Rawls bought the store from his brother in 1893. So this photograph dates it. It's dated right there. It can't be before 1893, and it can't be after 1895 because the tracks are there. So I was able to actually give a within 2-year date on that photograph as well. Next slide. This photograph is actually, there are 3 or 4 photographs that nobody has ever, I don't think anybody's ever realized it, but I've taken that previous photograph and this photograph and put them together. There's 3 photographs, and there's one gap missing of one store. They're all taken at the same time. And about the same time. How do I know that? I looked at the shadows. Okay? Also know how far you would have to be back to look down that entire block of West Side of Monroe Street. There were stores on the other side. You can't go past the other side of the street. So they had to take it in three different sequences. And I've actually taken a composite and put the 3 together and made up for the gap in the middle. But this one also has tracks. 1895, September of 1895, Sanborn came back and did another map. Guess what's missing? No red. It's gone. Boom. Gone. Next slide. I think this is actually going to repeat it. Go ahead to the next one. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the photographs. Go back one. This is not, even a high resolution of this photograph is not real good, but I blew it up as much as I can. Next slide. And there's the streetcar. I was trying to see if I could identify actually the streetcar. Next one, there's St. John's. And the next photograph that's in the state, there's 3 photographs in the state archives. This is the next one. This is streetcar number 2, and right there is the number 2, and also it's also right in here, and this is in front of the St. James Hotel. St. James is where Lewis State Bank, for those of you who are, it's now the Pennington Law Firm, I believe, is in that building. This is Jefferson Street, the east side of Jefferson Street. This is Monroe Street. It's right on the corner there. Next slide. There's a close-up of that. See? Number 2, right there. And right here, it says TSTRYCO. Tallahassee Street Railroad. Next slide. This is one looking across the street, looking kind of a northwest direction. This is College Avenue up here. It's taken between College and Jefferson Street. This is a very important photograph. Next slide. After I did my talk 2 years ago, I ran into a guy, another goosebump moment. And he says, I have a photograph of a streetcar. And I said, really? Well, he had one that had never been seen before. And here it is. And it's in excellent shape. This is streetcar number 1. Number 1, no smoking. Based on the terrain, I believe this is taken, there's Gain Street going down the hill from about Duval Street.
How did you get that picture?
Beg pardon?
How did he have that picture?
He bought a photo album at an estate sale. And I think I now know who that photograph album belonged to. But there's
So it was
2.
It was a one-off picture?
Beg pardon?
It was a one-off picture?
No, you get ready to see another? Next slide. There it is. There's the other one he had. These are photographs that had never been seen before. There was 3 in the state archives. I didn't find these until by chance. I mean, it's a story just how I came across this and talked to the guy. And so this one, I believe, is on Monroe Street because of the terrain. I believe this is on the other side of Tennessee Street, probably around Virginia Street, where that photograph over there is taken, approximately. But it's flat terrain. This streetcar is also number 1. Next slide. The lady that contacted me in New Mexico, I found another one. And here it is. And I blew it up. Here's another one. So 3 photographs that had never been seen before. Oh, and these are all in the book. But there, and this is streetcar number 1. And on the back of the photograph, and this was her great grandfather. On the back of the photograph, it says Fanny, the white mule. Next slide. I was trying to figure out I wanted to know what kind of have an idea of what the streetcars look like. These were a streetcar that I found at the Henry Ford Museum. Kind of get an idea of visually of what it looks like, with, in color, if you will. Next slide. Interior. These were not fancy. A lot of people think of the streetcars, like New York with velvet seats and all that kind of stuff. Not that. This is the interior. Next slide. Streetcar number 3. You've seen this photo. This was an important photo. I spent $50 and got a high-resolution photograph from State Archives. Next slide. I started looking at this. I'm going, by the way, there's Fanny. I didn't know what it meant, but I do know now. I was trying to figure out, I wanted to know where these streetcars came from. So I was looking at photographs of old streetcars and trying to make some, and so I got this high resolution. Next slide. And I started looking and I'm like, wait a minute, what is this right here? Next slide. That right there. I said, what is that? Next slide. And it's this. And it says, next slide, JBS. JBS. And that's, so I said, I'm on to something here. Next slide. There's the JBS. It's perforated. It is the John B. Slauson fare box. Fare box is where you drop your money in. And here are some examples. This is period specific now. This ad was from 1890. Next one. Now, this is the John B. Slauson's fare box. This is that streetcar at Ford Museum. There it is. Now notice that little lip there. Look here. look at the models. There's that model, and then this model is this model. Two different pair of boxes and two different street cars. Next one. John B. Slauson. I started researching John B. Slauson. John B. Slauson, in pushing his enterprises aided by the John Stevenson Car Company, in which he is a large stockholder and in which he was a treasurer. Every bobtail car built by this company contained a JBS Fairmont. When I found that, the hair stood up on my arm. I had found it. Next slide. Perforated, you notice Wickett's perforated with his initials. Do you remember those little dots on there? Perforated JBS? Next slide. There it is, JBS. Next slide. The cars were built by John Stevenson Company. I thought that they may have been built by Philadelphia. The two guys that came down from Philadelphia, so I was looking in that area. Come to find out, they're the John B. Slauson. These are period-specific advertisements. Next slide. There's one of them. This is identical in the features of the Tallahassee Street Railway. Next slide. There's another one, built in New York City. Next slide. Another one, and keep going. And I'm not going to go into this, but they were 16 feet long, and this has got all the dimensions. And I was looking, I had to find one that had 6 windows. If it didn't have 6 windows, it wasn't what I was looking for. Next slide. In November 1891, the supervisor, Bennett, asked the city if he could put stoves in it. You'll notice here, there's a stove, a pipe here and one here. A lot of those were used, it was used to draft out. They would hang a light so that the kerosene light would vent out of the cabin. But they put a heater in it. Tallahassee, you know how Tallahassee can get in the wintertime, it can be a little bit chilly. So they put in these, I don't know specifically if this was a heater, but this is a period specific heater that was actually put in. Next slide. The street, and Ollie Head, who was a carpenter and head merchant, was hired as a manager to manage streetcar. And so he contracted to build the government or he contracted with the contractor of the government building to haul bricks from the depot to the federal courthouse, which is on the corner of Adams and Park Avenue. Is now the DoubleTree. Is it still the DoubleTree? The big, tall, little restaurant on top? That's where it was. There were 500,000 bricks, over 4,000 cubic feet of stone, and several tons of iron. Next slide. Here's that courthouse. This is Park Avenue going east. That's Adams Street going south. And here's take a little further back. Of course, this was built in, completed in 1894, was demolished in 1964. I, as a kid, used to go to this, this door right here. I was born in '53. I was 11, so they tore it down when I was 11 years old. I used to go there because it had one of those rotating doors that you see, and we as kids would go there and play on it. Next slide. This photograph I had seen 1,000 times, and I'll show you that in a second. But the reason, this was actually them working on the foundation to build that building. And I'd seen this photograph because I have written another chapter in my book about the waterworks, another George Saxon thing. And here is Tallahassee's first water tower. Let's see, next slide. I colorized this so you could kind of get a better, it brings out the contrast. But here's the Presbyterian Church. This is the columns, which is now part of the Baptist Student Center. This is Park Avenue looking west. There's Adams Street right here. So the water tower was between the column, the old columns, which was moved, and the Presbyterian church, and so you can kind of see. But that was Tallahassee's first water tower. The water was turned on September 20th, 1892. Next slide. But going back to the photograph, I had looked at this photograph 1,000 times. But one day, I noticed something. Go ahead. On close examining, I noticed 3 piles of bricks. Next slide. There's one. Next. There it is. And then another one over here. There it is. And I went, wait a minute. Pile of bricks? Contracted to haul the bricks? Next slide. Next slide. Over in the corner. Go back a slide. Next slide. Okay. So I got the high resolution photograph. I saw those bricks and my eyes went over and I went, holy moly. They said that there was 4 streetcars. There weren't 4, there were 3. 3 and 1 gondola. Tallahassee Street Railway Company. Next slide. There it is, close up. Go back, go back, go back. Keep going, keep going. Go back again and again. And we'll keep going. That's it right there. I looked at this thing 1,000 times and had never seen that. And I got the high resolution. When I saw it, it blew up on my screen. I went, wait a minute, what is this? What is this? And I got the high resolution, and so let's go back to the next 4 or 5 slides. But I found it. There is the John Stevenson gondola. It's identical to the Tallahassee Street Railway gondola. Next. Steel rails. Next. We talked about steel rails. We didn't talk about steel. We saw the steel rails, and I'm going to kind of go through this because I'm starting around out of time. They were 56 pounds. Next slide. They're made 56 pounds because they were planning on using regular freight cars to it, so they had to have a heavier grade rail. The Jacksonville and the others use 25, 30, and 40 pound rail. Next slide. All of this information comes from this. This is PORS. This is PORS. They do this every year, and it tells you how much the rail weighs, how many miles, how many sidetracks. Next slide. Let's go on. So they were having problems with the streetcar. Go ahead. The title of my chapter is Mud on the Tracks. Next slide. Arva Hopkins reported that he had removed the last of the rail in 1897, and they tore that up on Gaines Street. Next slide. In December of 2020, Gerald Inslee wrote an article about Ed Jonas. Ed Jonas had found some rail in Cascades. Next slide. He's the one that did this painting. It's a little, I'll make this story quick. I contacted him and I said, you're going to think I'm a nut, but I think I know where that rail and what you have. We communicated back and forth. He sent me some photographs. I finished the chapter and sent it to him, a PDF, and his wife called me about 4 days later, said he had fallen off the ladder, hit his head, and died. I was floored. But before he died, he got to know the rail. Next slide. He found this rail. It was on 2 bridges, and it's across the backside on the other side of what was used to be the jail. But here's the rail used in the guardrail for the bridge. Next slide. He convinced them to let him have 2 pieces of that rail. He retrieved them in Cascade Park. I was able to figure this out because Arva Hopkins bought from George Saxon 196.12 tons of steep rail, 2 miles of track for $830 in 1899. Next slide. On that rail is this mill mark. PSCO 90, next slide. Pennsylvania Steel Corporation, 1890. That's where this rail came from the hometown of the two Bennett relatives. But this is that steel rail is where it was built, and this is a period specific advertisement from 1887. Next slide. Ed died. The man fell off his ladder. His widow, I found this after the meeting, after I kept my talk. A guy came up to me, he's my cousin. He says, I know where that rail is. He said, a friend of mine is in air conditioning. And the widow said, if you take this off the property, because she's trying to sell the house, you can have it. So he took it. That was on Thursday, he told me that. On Saturday, he calls me on the phone, he says, it's on the back of my trailer, it's on the way to my house. And here we are at his house in Waukena, looking at the rail. There it is. I cut a piece, I had a piece cut 12 inches, because it's heavy. It's 56 pounds for every 3 feet. And this is now on exhibit here at the Tallahassee Museum. I've donated it. This is where it needed to be. Now, I have another piece of rail. There's 2 rails in that, and I have identified the other rail, and it was 1883, and it was the rail that was used for the ice house, which is where the Edison is now. Next slide. Why did it fail? I'm not going to go, but keep going. It failed, keep going. It failed basically because Tallahassee, and you know what? I have that information that you asked about population. It's in here.
It wasn't big enough to support it.
There was not enough people. Keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, go back one more. No, go back one more. Keep going. Go forward. I'm sorry. The tracks. Continue. The next one. Street did not go. Next one. Okay. Anyway, the bottom line was there wasn't enough people riding it, and it was 5 cents a mile. 5 cents per ride. Go to the next. One of the competition was the omnibus at the Leon Hotel. But Ben McGinnis said, well, that wasn't competition because they charged 25 cents. Next slide. The main contributing factor to failure was the lack of patronage due partially to only one passenger train arrival per day with a city population of 2,700 in 1890 and 3,500 in 1895. Which just didn't cover the cost. Next slide. They cost $830 per car average, and it would take 49,805 cent passenger just to cover the investment in the cars. They weren't doing it to make money. They were going to use it for the other end of the railroad connecting to both lines, and the money they would have saved by using the city streets versus having to grade outside of the street. It was. They knew that it wasn't going to make money. Next slide.
So it was really built less for local passengers than it was to connect the two ends of the railroad.
I believe that is the actual purpose, was to connect to the other lines, and this was just an interim, and then they could use it at the same time. And that would have been part of the reason the city ordinance allowed them to have more than one track. Remember the Sanborn maps? So they could have had a train on one and still had the streetcar. Next one. Just one quick, I'm almost ready to wrap it up. Of course it failed. And then in 1916, starting at, I think this is 5th Avenue, coming down basically the same route, although it goes in front of the university, was going to be an electric trolley in 1916. War hit, it went. Next slide. So you can see the green is the Tallahassee Street Railway, okay, and then Mentzer's proposed is in red, and of course that was the proposed. So you can see the difference in the two routes, both going to the depot. Next slide. And so,
Not my book.
no, that's it. Next slide. Thanks for coming. We have 10 minutes, and so questions.
Did any of the other cities that you put on one of the first slides have the challenge to make it like in Tallahassee where you had to go up the hill?
Florida.
I'm in Florida, but did any other those cities have a challenge to, I can't remember what they were. It seemed like most of them.
All those cities were flat. They didn't have the hills that we had here. And Pensacola didn't have the hills
So
either.
it was a challenge.
Yeah, now and that was why they call it mud on track, because they were trying to come up Gain Street. Well, they started out, and nobody, and Sally Blake, none of them, originally there were horses. And the horses couldn't make that grade and pull that thing up that hill on Gain Street. Gain Street's been graded a lot. And I have it, it's in my book. I actually have the grade at Railroad Avenue or the elevation, thank you. The elevation at Gain Street, at Railroad Avenue, and the elevation and it's quite a bit, and I want to say it was like 400 feet, but my numbers are right. But it was a steep grade, and so they went to the mules. They started out with 2 mules, that didn't work, so they had to go to the third.
I wonder what the tipping point would have been in terms of population to make it pay.
I don't think it would ever pay, because you charge them 5 cents. Any other questions? Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Next slide. No, go back slide. I'm sorry. Next Thursday, folks, come and hear me again. I won't be talking about the street battle. I just briefly mentioned. It's like one photograph, one slide, and boom. I'm not going to go into detail. But Mission San Luis. Please, y'all come. Please come to Mission San Luis Historical Society. I don't have the time, but we do food, little hors d'oeuvres kind of stuff at 5:30, and then the talk starts at 6. All right.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you.